Welcome to From Here to Eternity, a Gateway Seminary podcast about the nations. My name is Phil Hopkins. I'm the host. I'm a professor of missions here at Gateway Seminary. Until recently, I lived overseas for around 20 years. In this podcast, we address topics related to the cross-cultural spread of the gospel, from here in California, across the U.S., and throughout the world. Today, we have Victor Chayasirisobhan. Forgive me for mispronouncing your name, but
They're just fine.
He is the executive pastor of First Southern Baptist Church in Anaheim. He is the director of missions of Orange County for the Southern Baptist Convention. And he is one of our new board of trustee members of Gateway Seminary. So he has multiple degrees and loves Gateway and loves California. As you see all these degrees that he has from Cal Baptist and from Gateway Golden Gate. He is one of our beloved alumni. He loves the school more than just about anyone, and promotes it wherever we can. So I'm super happy to have you on, and I just kind of want to dive in and just talk to you about your life and about how God has used you. And if we could just start by, could you just share your testimony, how you came to faith in Christ, and a little bit about your background?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, what a privilege it is to be on this podcast. Dr. Hopkins, Phil, we appreciate you very much. Thank you for the invitation. And yeah, it's a privilege to help my alma mater however I can. We love Gateway Seminary, love the great things you are doing, especially in the missions program. I was born into a Christian family. My dad was several generations of Christian coming out of China and through Thailand. My mom was new to the faith after marrying my dad. And so where I first heard about Jesus was from my parents and from my influence of my Sunday school teachers. And so somewhere along the line, I think I was about 7 or 8 years old. 1987, 9 years old. Okay. My Sunday school teacher, Lois Cadwaller, after teaching me for years, using the felt boards and, learning, to sing in the choir, as a child, and being in the Christmas plays that were the Thai edition. So nothing like the American edition, but the Thai edition. At some point along the line, she said, hey, do you want to, make this official? Do you want to believe in Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior? And I said, well, I already thought I did, but if there's something I can do more, he says, well, and so she led me through the sinner's prayer, and it was something that was very meaningful for me because I really respected her and loved her, and again, believed in God. God was always it was real to me, and his name was Jesus, and so confessing my sins to him, believing in him. And the reason why I remember is because after that, she gave me a Bible. And in that Bible, it was a New King James Version Bible. She wrote, one day you're going to do great things for Jesus Christ. And I actually had lost that Bible until about my second year that I was serving as pastor of the First Southern Baptist Church of Anaheim. I found that Bible. I opened it up, and it just sent back a rush of emotion, remembering, those moments with Lois, who I've reconnected with through the years, just to know what an impact she had on my life. And of course, again, my parents, and seeing how my mom grew in faith over the years from being somebody who was kind of in between, still going to temple a little bit, for funerals, when family came to visit from Thailand, because most of my family still lives in Thailand. It's me and my mom and dad and maybe one of my mom's brothers that's here, but everybody else is in Thailand. And just watching her then just come to say, okay, I don't really need that anymore. Certainly respect tradition, but I believe in Jesus. And now, whether it's anything that comes, war, fire, sickness, she's always the one that's like, no, Jesus is going to take. She's very confident in her prayers, very confident in telling us to remember God. And even when our pastor knees get shaky, my mom is very much like, yeah. So that is, again, how I came to faith. Fell away for a time, grew up in the world of churches that broke, and around my teenage years, really hurt and made me kind of lose faith in the faith community. But God, after about 5 years, he kind of brought me back out of that set of circumstances that, I really appreciate. And since then, I kind of made a vow to serve him when I was 17 years old, and I have been serving him ever since.
Okay. So you're 17, you're junior, senior in high school.
That's right.
And why did you decide to go to, I think you went to University of California, Irvine. Is that right?
Yeah, so I went to UC Irvine. So at 17, I went to UC Irvine. I kind of started early. I majored in biology and chemistry. Everything that I was told my entire life was that my dad was a doctor, my grandpa was a doctor. I was told that all the way back from thousands of generations, they were all doctors. Now, after doing a study, one of my classes at Gateway Seminary, I realized that might have not necessarily been true. Maybe like 6 generations ago, we were farmers, but then I was told that there was no medical school back then. So they were kind of like, something would happen, they would help people on the farm or whatever. But so that's why I went to UC Irvine. I went there to major in biology, to get into medical school, which I did up in San Francisco, Touro University, College of Osteopathic Medicine. And, I was set for a life in medicine, to follow in the footsteps of my dad, to be a family medicine doctor. He's a neurologist. And, and life was going good. Everything was on track. Dad had paid hundreds of $1,000s for medical school. I had the long coat. I was being called Dr. Chayasirisobhon. And then God called me into the ministry and at this church. And I thought I was really only going to help for about a year. You see, Phil, I had told myself after all of this growing up in breaking churches that if I ever had a chance when I was older, I would try to help. Mm-hmm. And once again, I saw a church that I thought all American churches, except for the Crystal Cathedral, were older, in their 70s and about to close. Because that's the only context that we saw in every denomination that my dad planted a church and rented from. That's what we saw. And so I told myself that if ever I had a chance, I would. And so as I started to feel this call, I went visiting different churches. I landed at the First Southern Baptist Church of Anaheim. Thought everything was good until a couple weeks. I realized that the pastor was preaching the same sermon every single week. It was a really good sermon too, so it was a joy to listen to. But it turned out that he was kind of on the slippery slope of Alzheimer's disease. With my medical background, my dad's medical background, I kind of knew exactly what I was looking at. There was only 8 people in the church at the time, but again, I was used to that. And so I just stuck around to help take out the trash, just kind of try to help around the church and take care of the people. And, and one thing led to another. One weekend, the pastor couldn't preach. My dad was also, again, a preacher at the time at the Thai church. So they called the house looking for him to see if he could preach. I knew that he wasn't available, so I told them, push come to shove, if you can't find anybody. When I was youth pastoring up in San Rafael in my med school days up there, they did teach me to preach to adults. So if you absolutely can't find anybody, it's Saturday morning, I'm willing to, fill in. And then within seconds, the pastor's wife was like, yes, we want you to preach. And I was like, wait a second. There was no hesitation. I didn't even hear you ask anybody. And then the horror of her hanging up the phone after that and me going, oh no, what am I going to do? So I stayed up all night, trying to figure out how I was going to preach to these people. I mean, I played with G.I. Joes and they were G.I. Joe, right? So how I was going to connect to these people, and God gave me a message on his love. It just kind of went like, life is about love. God is love. And so life is truly about knowing God and serving him. And I came to that church the next day. I preached that message. I thought they'd throw stones and, again, attack me. They did not. And every week after that, they invited me back because either the pastor was sick or something was going on. And, and so 1 year later, the pastor decided he was going to retire. I was very happily going to go back to medicine until they asked me if I could be their pastor of their church. And I don't remember ever accepting the job, but I've been here for 20 years. So that's just what it is. Now I got a young guy coming up with me 3 years ago, because 3 years ago I had the opportunity to take on the role of director of mission at Orange County Southern Baptist Association, as you've mentioned. And so now Pastor Josh Sanchez is our lead pastor, and I have retained the title of senior pastor, which basically means if there's any drama, Victor, you handle it, and still preach, half the month. Josh preaches the other. And we are kind of like, we went from singles wrestling to tag team wrestling now. And so we're trying to win this tag team championship at the First Southern Baptist Church of Anaheim.
So when you got there, you said there was like 8 people that were there, and now, like, how many do you like? Not that numbers matter, but I'm just out of curiosity, like how many people are there on a regular basis
now?
Yeah.
Well, again, on our Sunday morning service, we have about 80 to 90 people on average these days. If you count the kids, we're over 100. But what I'm really proud of is our model of church. We have about 600 to 700 people worshiping here every single week, between our 6 churches, our school, that again, we don't operate as a renting situation. It's all, we work together. Like, for example, this week that you're doing this podcast, we have VBS. So all of our churches, including the Chinese church down the street, Chinese Baptist Church of Orange County, that this church helped plant back in the 80s, have come together, and we're doing this VBS because the VBS is for the community, right? To try to reach the children of the community, but also to disciple the kids of the church. And because Chinese Baptist Church is only about 1 minute drive that way, we have a mutual community in between us. And about maybe a little over a decade ago, me and their senior pastor, Pastor Eng at the time, said, why don't we just do this together? And they thought it was a great idea. So we switch off between the 2 campuses. And it's nice because VBS is not just for the children. For us, it's for the youth. And we also have adult classes in Thai, Mandarin, Cantonese, Spanish, English. So the adults bring their kids. They stay for the classes, which in our English this year, they're not only just learning scripture, but they're also learning CPR. So that's really good. So just being creative in those ways. And, and of course, our school is off for the summer, or else we'd have even more people here. Like, we have a preschool through 12th grade, of which I'm the principal as well. I have the great privilege of doing that.
One of the things I've noticed about Anaheim is that it is very much a melting pot, right? I mean, it's like the ideal of what America, in my opinion, should look like, right? It's kind of like maybe like a mini New York City in that respect.
Sure. Dr. Hoff taught us to call it like a tossed salad or a mixed salad or something, a salad bowl or something like that. Yeah.
And as you know, I have an interest in Iran, and you have there's a bunch of Iranians in that area, and with the recent events that are going on, it's like, how are people taking it in your neighborhood? The Iranians, I know with my friends, they're kind of scared.
Sure.
Is that kind of like a normal thing, just with where you are, or is it just some of my friends in Iran?
No. I mean, it's really tough. I mean, again, I went to UC Irvine, so I'm not somebody who all my friends at UC Irvine were either Asian or Persian. And I was actually more comfortable with the Persians. And so, I learned to speak a little Farsi, and, it was difficult because things like 9/11, even though it wasn't the Iranians, things were just getting better in terms of them not facing some of that stereotypical hatred. And then something like 9/11 happens, and they're sad about it too. I mean, America, they're Americans, and Iranians, but people are now looking at them when they get on a plane, and it's like uncomfortable. And that's not always everybody's context. And right now, kind of what the people from China faced at the beginning of the pandemic, right? Iranians are facing again. And so it's more of, that, here we go again, sadly. And as people don't necessarily distinguish between the different Arabic peoples, Iranians, or even Israelis, from Israel, right? Like, they know what an Orthodox Jew looks like, but they don't necessarily know what an Israeli looks like. And sometimes they lump them all in the same category. So it's extremely uncomfortable. It's sad. There's a worry about family. There's a worry about what's being reported. And also, without getting too political, there is, ISIS around right now, and a lot of them are also getting kind of picked up because of that. So it's kind of back to COVID measures. A lot of people are kind of shelter in place because it's tough to go outside. And so our ministry context is bringing food and even money and resources to these people who are scared to go to work, even though they're American citizens, right? So no, it's not just in Iran. It's definitely in our context here in Orange County, even in Orange County, if you can imagine that. It's as a church leader, as a ministry leader, as an influencer over, other ministry leaders. It's sort of that awareness to say, okay, this is what's going on. This is part of now maybe a mission that you can take on. What can you do about it? And so, yeah.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned 9/11 because I don't know, you may not know this, but like this is when 9/11 happened. There were candlelight vigils for the deaths of the victims in Tehran. I remember that because CNN reported that. It was funny because back in that time, that was one of the things that got me interested in Iran because you think Iran, you think terrorism, you think the Great
Sure.
right, and all this. Then you hear that these people in Tehran, the capital of Iran, are holding these spontaneous candlelight vigils for the victims of 9/11. That was made a pretty big impact on me. But I could talk about Iran forever. But that's not what we're here to talk about. But let me ask you.
Seriously though. But even that stating that I think is really important. Okay, so I'm glad you brought that up because again, people just think, oh no, it's all death to America. And no, there were times, there were opportunities, and without getting into all the politics of it, there were instances like that that did happen and are notable.
Yeah, it is. I don't know. Have you been to Iran by chance?
I have not. I've always wanted to go see the fires that have burned for 1,000 years.
Yep.
I really just wanted to go see my friends' families and eat the delicious foods. The resh polo is still one of my favorite dishes. I eat Persian food every single week. I'd like to eat it in Iran, but I don't know when I'm going to get. I just wish the whole region would just be cool. And I know this sounds really selfish, but because there's just so much archaeological stuff there, like I would just can I please just go dig a little? Just a little bit, maybe touch the sand, yeah.
It is beautiful. Outside of maybe Israel, especially when Old Testament history, you have Cyrus, Darius, the tombs.
Yes.
There's Bibles that date back to 1,200, I think 1,200 years ago. I think you have some of the Armenian Bibles, right? You have it in the Esfahan, the Armenian area of Esfahan that we were able to see. It is a beautiful, beautiful country. And yeah, it's unfortunate that things are the way they are. But
sure.
If you have a chance, it is. I've said this before, but I think that the beauties of Iran are only surpassed by the kindness of their people. So
let's go together, bro. Let's go together.
I wish I could. I'm blacklisted. I've been blacklisted since 2000 for a long time.
Maybe as the Lord leads.
I will go. Man, if you're a board of trustee guy, if Gateway could set up an extension center there or something like that, I'd be there tomorrow.
That would be something, wouldn't it? What's interesting? It might be just a. It could be one day more of a secular institution that actually gets us in there, with the WWE operating in the region, doing large events in Saudi Arabia. Nobody ever thought that a Western voice would be able to get into Saudi Arabia, particularly to speak to the women there. But you can see now that the women are wrestling matches there, still obviously covered in some ways, but certainly not covered in the way that they were when they first started doing events there. And so there's just a lot of opportunities through things like that to attend a wrestling event, but at some time just be. And sometimes just being God can use.
Yeah. Hey, if you have a chance, go to Armenia. There's a couple of good Iranian restaurants there that are run by, they call them Parskai, they're Iranian, Armenian, but it's beautiful. That whole area is just beautiful. So, again, we could talk forever about that, but I don't want to disrespect you.
You're good. You're good.
So, hey, another thing, there's a joke, like you see all those degrees. You have like 7 degrees from Cal Baptist and another, like probably another dozen from Gateway. What possessed you to get all these degrees from these schools? We know you love them.
Well, okay, so ask your own faculty. Okay, so men like you possessed me to get degrees like this. So I came here because I was the pastor of a Southern Baptist church and had no idea what it was to be a Southern Baptist. So I enrolled at Gateway Seminary, at that time Golden Gate, because my professor at John Savang, my mentor at John Savang Lin, was I guess you should call it advanced. He was an advanced faculty teacher for like 30 years. Like he's one of your oldest advanced teachers up north. And I know that's where he taught. So I thought, you know what, this would honor him, make him proud while serve my purposes of learning what it is to be a Southern Baptist. And there was a campus right here at Brea, right by the mall that I loved going to. And so I went there thinking that everybody would hate me, that I was going to be different from everybody else. I was just going to meet a couple of old Anglo-Saxon dudes who just kind of like judged me. And that's not what I found at all. I found people that loved me. Dr. Eddie Pate was the director at the time. He embraced me like just a cool friend. He was baptized in my church, so we had that connection like way back when he was a kid. His family had come here through First Southern because First Southern was kind of like the Saddleback of the 50s or whatever. And then Dr. Joe Kim was there, and he helped me get over a little bit of prejudice I had against Koreans because that's who I went to college with, high school with, and sometimes when you're a minority amongst a majority group, it can be a certain way. And but he loved me, embraced me, and so as I went through my MDiv process, and they were there for me as I was trying to pastor this church, trying to be newly married, trying to have kids. I mean, I was taking a Greek quiz when my wife went into labor. I raised my hand and I said, Dr. Mobley, I finished my quiz. Can I please leave? And he said, what do you need to leave for? I said, well, my wife's having a baby. And he's like, she's having a baby and you're sitting here? Get out of here. And so, it's just so when you go through that many milestones, it's hard, it becomes family. And so as I got to sort of my final year, Dr. Kelly was leading the educational leadership program. They allowed me to, I just took some classes with him. It was really enjoyable. Just enjoyed being with my professors. So they were starting a missiology program here with Dr. Pate. And so he said, hey, I think he was joking. He was like, would you consider joining this program? I was like, more classes with you? Yes, please. And then so I enrolled in that program. And then they were starting an intercultural studies program with Dr. Kim. And he was like, hey, we're doing intercultural. I was like, more classes with you? Sign me up, And more important than that, I would bring my friends because my friends wouldn't do it unless I did it. Right? Like, because some of them wanted to go to class, but they also wanted to be in class with me, And so, then Jim Wilson invited me to the Doctorate of Ministry program with a tremendous privilege to be a part of that program. I think it took me the longest amount of time to graduate from that program, but I did. And and then during the pandemic, things were very hard, because things shut down. But one of the things that kept going was the online component at Gateway Seminary. Dr. Orge was, prescient enough to kind of migrate the school that way. And I really knew deep down that I actually needed counseling, not just to learn about counseling, because there was a lot going on. So I enrolled in the Christian counseling program, got to sit at the feet of Bill Steele and Debbie Steele, and that was incredible. Getting in touch with a part of me that I had been taught my whole life to just push down, and ultimately that made me a stronger leader. That led me to meet a professor named Dr. Nathan Lewis, who actually taught at Cal Baptist. And so when I was done at Gateway, I enrolled at CBU in their counseling ministry program just to sit at his feet. I mean, no offense to him, but he's kind of an older guy. And so I didn't want to miss the boat, like I didn't want to be sitting at his feet in heaven. I wanted to sit in his feet here because I felt like he had, some even more of that sort of nouthetic biblical counseling aspect to balance some of the stuff that we were also getting, at Gateway Seminary, which was also very good. And so that's how I ended up with all these different degrees. And I love learning, but I also love my classmates and my professors. And I'm kind of addicted to that. Like it's a peaceful place for me. And imagine all of that before even the AI era hit, you know what I mean? So, I think, the AI era, has a lot of people it's the nature of education's changing, right?
Sure.
But I can say I got 13 degrees before the AI era hit. But I'll also say if degrees are the only thing that you're going for, I wanted to say that, if you have a degree and you're not using it to serve God, then toilet paper is worth more, And so I wanted to show it. But if you also have all these degrees and you are lording it over others like you're the God's gift to mankind, then you also have a problem, right? I'm Victor Chayasirisobhan. I got these degrees, and I'm glad that it opens doors and allows me to have healthy conversations and make me have an affinity to an alma mater that I love. But I just enjoy serving God with the arrows that these degrees help put in my quiver.
So let me ask you a question. You've been in ministry now for 20, 30 years at least, right?
30 years if you count youth ministry. That's right.
30 years, you have a bunch of degrees.
Yes, sir.
So what is one thing you wish you would have known earlier in your ministry career that you know now?
One thing that I would have wanted to know a little bit earlier was, that God, that you being you, the person that God made you in and of yourself and how he's molding you is good enough. Some of these degrees, part of the ambition was feeling insecure, in who I was and not embracing who God made me and how he was speaking to me. And so some of that, I would say, worldly ambition and insecurity kind of crept in and messed with some of the learning. If I could just tell myself, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, hey, you're going to be fine. God made you for a purpose, and, just continue to learn and make mistakes and push through them and, and learn all of these amazing things that you're learning in seminary. I think that would have been more helpful. Just relax. Don't be so anxious, or even competitive, at times, very much in the beginning. I think my dad would tell you, that I wish God would have told him just to tell me not to go to medical school and not to spend the $200,000 that he spent there. You know what I mean? Again, all of it is a part of the context. So whether you're coming to seminary early, right out of college, or you're coming what you would consider a little bit later, it's all good because we should be lifelong learners. And quite honestly, I'm still in school right now. So,
That's a beauty, though, right? You're an educator yourself. You're a principal. You're a head pastor. You're a DOM. You're a board of trustee member. You've done a lot with the convention, and like where do you get all the energy? Like how does your wife, you have a wife and kids too. So how does that all work with your family dynamics?
So first off, it's always a family decision. Now it doesn't mean that there's not a lot of negotiation. You know what I mean? But it is always a family decision. And I think mainly because it's just kind of always been a part of our life. I never stopped going to school. They, and they're just used to that. And they're used to actually the context of when my kids are like, oh man, I've got homework, I'm so frustrated. I don't like my teacher. it's kind of nice to be able to say, you know what, I have homework too, and I'm frustrated. And I also am a little frustrated with my teacher. And so connecting with your dad in that way at the many different levels, I think has actually helped me to be a more in touch father, you know. And my wife knows we were actually supposed to take turns. Like I was supposed to go to school and then she was supposed to go to school, whatever school, but she just kind of never took her turn. So I keep asking for her turn. I was like, so would you mind if I just kind of take my turn? And it got to the point where she understands, and I think she understands that it just, a lot of this stuff just relaxes me. It's my comfort zone. And especially in the world where you can do remote access or even online, it's just made it a lot simpler. Like I couldn't do the in-person that I did back in like 2006, like to 2014, 2015. Like I would have had to like kind of stop. But because of the independent nature of working in your doctorate of ministry after the cohort sessions, and now with online remote access and the ways that I know how to use the technology, it allows me to continue to do that. So, my wife's a very patient woman. Let's give her major credit. They used to give a pushing your spouse through award for the degrees that you got at Gateway, and there would be a whole ceremony. They brought your spouse up there. I wish they really would keep doing that, because if I've got 16 degrees now, she deserves 17, just because I couldn't have done any of this stuff without her. Now, where does the energy come from? Again, I like doing what I like. I like it, like I like what I'm reading. It's fun because it helps me in my context, like I have to give pastors advice as a DOM. I have to be there for students and people in my neighborhood and my own children. And so these books that I'm reading help me to be a better counselor, be a better leader, stay in touch with scripture in terms of what people are thinking. They allow me to have interesting conversations with people. And so it doesn't take a lot. It's just something that I like. So I always tell people, like, what do you do for fun? And they'll tell me, they walk or they jog or they play basketball or they play video games or they cook or fishing or whatever. This is what I do for fun, and apparently it's entertaining to some people because it's kind of the first thing SPCers go to. They're like, so you're the guy with like 1 million degrees, And again, lastly, too, it's like what I think is good is whether you respect titles or degrees. If it's titles that what made you like the greatest person on earth and degrees that made you the greatest person on earth, then you have to respect me as the greatest person on earth. And nobody respects me as the greatest person on earth. So it has to be something else, right? And so it keeps us humble, right, to say that it's still the Lord that makes us righteous. It's still the Lord that inspires, whether it's the child to the senior, to do great things for him. And so I just do these things as offerings to God, and my family kind of sees it that way. And he really inspires me through his Holy Spirit to, there are days where I'm like, I just don't want to do that assignment. You know what I mean? And thank God, I will say this. I would not have any of these degrees if not for the grace of all my professors across the board. Like, they are gracious. I got A's where I was probably supposed to get B's or C's. And, but I'll tell you, I think what my professors know is from Victor Chayasirisobhon, whether it's 47-year-old Victor or 17-year-old Victor, you're going to get maximum effort. Now, that might be 100% of 10% of what I have. You know what I mean? But you're going to get 100%. And if I can't do it, I'm going to tell you why, and I'm just going to be honest about that because I'm comfortable with myself. And if it's not good enough, I'll take the F and let me retake it again. Thank God for the cooperative program who helps keep my tuition affordable.
There you go. Hey, let me ask you a bit of a cultural question. You
Sure.
grew up in more of an Eastern culture, right? You're from in America, but you're Thai, and you come to you're in America in a multicultural environment. But then you're with the Southern Baptists, who are very Western in how they operate. So how has the transition been? How do you incorporate what are some of the beauties you see about your culture the Eastern culture that you want to incorporate into the Southern Baptist Convention? And where do you see some of the things that maybe you've learned from the
Oh
SBC as
man,
well?
first off, I love the SBC. The SBC is my family. We're a weird family, but most families are. And we're a very, very large family. So we have a large amount of weirdness. We also have a large amount of brilliance, and which gives us a large amount of opportunity. And so, yeah, I'm Thai, Chinese, Vietnamese, and French, born in Canada, raised in America. After I was about 6 years old, we came here in 1984 to LA. The Olympics was here, and where I grew up with Hispanics, right? And so I'm actually most comfortable around Hispanics, more so even though than Asians. But my family raised me to speak Thai. I speak Thai, Spanish, and English, and very much, like you say, Eastern, in that we would go back to Thailand also every single year to make sure that I had that culture and all the mannerisms and everything like that. I think the SBC is awesome because it has its own culture and it has so many tremendous amounts of subcultures. And so it's a really interesting study. And when I had the opportunity to be first vice president of the SBC in particular, because I had a president that wanted to actually give me an opportunity to serve, I would go around to different groups of Southern Baptists around the country, and I would learn the tremendous diversity that we had just among maybe people that I was ignorant to say was just the same group. And they absolutely weren't. So there was a reason why they couldn't grasp some of these like wild concepts that they saw coming out of California or even out of Eastern culture, right? But one of the things that I would say, that I try to help my fellow SBC family learn about is basically that there is another culture outside of Western cultures. And so I'm the guy in the room who typically gets invited in for whatever reasons. And I have the opportunity to say, so is this just for English speaking people or is it for non-English speaking people? And that usually is a earth shattering moment, where it's like, oh man, like we kind of forgot about them. Or if it's like sort of like a, African-American Anglo conversation, I have the opportunity to say, so which one am I? Like, which group am I in? Like, I'd like to know just so I know which one to kind of like, go for, and usually that's, kind of an eye-opening moment. And that's why, I'm a part of the Unify project that was started by President Ed Litton and former President Fred Luter as well, as they work on some of these things. So we try to do that. With the as the director of the SBC Asian Collective for the National Convention, what I'm hoping to do is to bring awareness of how Asians are not just a mission field anymore, but we're also, as Dr. Orge and Peter Yanis have put it, a mission force. And we are, whether it's Korea, China, we're sending missionaries like mad out into the field. And even our churches are doing that. And that Asia in and of itself is a kind of a Western construct. We don't have a universal language that unites us. So when I direct the SBC Asian Collective, it is quite a challenge because there's like 15 different languages in that room, even though, the many we look the same, even though so where we connect is actually non-verbally, and most importantly, in Christ. And so the opportunity to teach Eastern cultures to be more Western, like there is a time to speak up, right? Our Anglo and African American brothers are very good at that. They know when to march. They know when to speak up. They know how to advocate for different things. In Asian context or Eastern context, it's really not, if you step up, it might be okay, but if you step up too much, you're almost betraying the culture. Like, how dare you do that? You don't have respect. And so teaching people from an Eastern context to kind of understand that there is a time to do that, helping them to then understand the children that they've had who are now Asian American and live in that world like I do, as a kind of a 1.5 generation guy, and, teaching sort of Western cultures again about, nonverbal communication, which is 90% of what we do, and really knowing when to just let something sit in a communal culture that I think is the context of Scripture. So if we're a family, right, there's a family that develops out of an individualistic culture, and there's family that develops out of communal culture. And I think that our SBC family can benefit from a little bit more of the definition, perhaps, of the other definitions of what Easterners refer to when we say family. Which, again, certainly is not monopolized by Asians, all right? You see that in Hispanics. You see that in Middle Eastern culture as well. And I think you actually see it in 1950s American culture. It just kind of changed as we became a global power and, had more influence. I believe. I could be wrong. Ask a historian, Maybe I have to do a major in U.S. history or a degree in that. We'll figure it out. So.
It is interesting, how do we become a lot more individualistic? Because back in the day, if what you say is right, then we were a lot more communal. I'm sure technology has something to do with that, but you have that in Asian cultures and everywhere else too. So it's got to be more than just globalization. Let me ask you this. We've talked about this a little bit, but if you were to add, if someone were thinking about going to seminary, or is in the middle of seminary, if they wanted, if you could give them one piece of advice, one thing just to remember, what would that be?
Yeah, don't quit. Don't stop. Keep going. Go all the way to the end and think about doing more. That's what I would say. The seminary is a wonderful, wonderful place, and it's a great place to fill your quiver with arrows that are only going to be valuable if you use them. Take advantage of the treasure of professors that you have there and the treasure of classmates that you have there. One of the funnest things that I do is sit next to my classmates at times when I'm able to go to whether it's a seminar or, just a conference or something like that. And I'm sitting in class. This is a little bit later, senior pastor for maybe 7 or 8 years. And they just know me as Victor, who has the right in that classroom to be wrong, to have the dumbest idea in the world, to get an F on his paper. And, and in that moment, find someone comes in and says, "Hey, Pastor Victor, da-da-da-da-da." And they sit next to you and they go, "Wait a second, you're a pastor already? Like you've been doing this for 10 years. How come you didn't say anything?" That's who's sitting next to you. Value each other, value the place, and keep going. Don't stop. Even one class every single semester, will get you to the promised land. But the promised land is not really a destination. It's what are you going to do once you get there? It's not just a matter, it's like in ethnic church. Getting a building is not the goal. It's then doing something and sharing that building that nobody ever shared with you, right? And making it last, from generation to generation to generation, not as an idol, but as a tool that God can use. And so in the same way, I would say, keep going, take it. Don't just do the work, turn it in for the grade. That's not actually the joy and the benefit of seminary. The benefit of seminary, number one, is what God put you there for. And that is, yes, grades to make you feel good about yourself. Hooray, you got an A, you're smart. But man, where would I be without every single one of my professors, that I had at Gateway Seminary, Cal Baptist now, Southwestern, Southeastern, where would I be without them? But particularly at Gateway, because I went there in person and I went there remotely. And, these are places where I really, really got to know everyone. And that was such a benefit. If they could have class with you and just know you, I mean, you are such an interesting treasure trove of a person, And so if they go beyond the information that you're giving them that is intelligent and can get to the wisdom that flows from you in terms of how to use the intelligence that you just gave them, that's a tremendous benefit. So don't stop, lean in and take advantage of every moment that you have there, because before you know it, it's gone. You graduate and you're like, what? Like, now what do I do? And if you're Victor Chayasirisobhon, you start looking around, and but at some point that day is going to come to an end. I think it's when I turn 50 years old, and maybe at that point we'll start really leaning into teaching or writing books or something like that. So, yeah.
So speaking of that, books, of all the reading you've done, like what's outside of the Bible, obviously, but what's like the one book you've impacted you the most?
Phil, Dr. Hopkins, I really tried to think of this, and I've asked this question. I've been asked this question so many times. And first off, I love reading. I love all the modalities of reading now. I mean, Kindle and the way you're able to highlight and the thing saves all your highlighted stuff. I mean, it's just easier now. But I could not tell you a single book that I value, that is just the one. I would say this, that whenever people ask me that, I will tell you. You said besides the Bible, I would have to say the Bible, mainly because, people often start reading all these other books and then they forget about going back to read the Bible, and they end up reading about what everybody else thinks about the Bible, interpret the Bible, and then they forget about the source material itself. I would say, if you have the Bible, continue to always lean into that, whether it's Greek, Hebrew, or, studies like, for example, John Sailhammer, Pentateuch's narrative, for example. Mind-blowing as to how he read it in the Hebrew, taught it to me as he was teaching from the Hebrew Bible in English, right? And he's saying, well, maybe the land refers to this. Now, that's very interesting, But I would also say that in some of my courses, they took some secular books and they baptized them, particularly in leadership studies, for example, as that has emerged as a field. And I think we have to be careful there, but I also don't think we have to label every secular book as heresy. We just have to be careful where it comes from. And so, so I'm sorry, Dr. Hopkins, I don't have a really good answer for you in terms of that. I love reading the Bible. I still read my Bible every single day. I'll pick a different Bible because I've had different professors be different translators for each Bible. So whether it was Holman Christian Standard, New American Standard, New King James, which I was given by Lois Cadwallader. But a practice that I do every single week, Dr. Hopkins, is this. I read through the book of Psalms. And depending upon how stressful the week is how far I get in the book of Psalms. And if I really have a stressful week, I get all the way into Proverbs, you know what I mean? But most weeks I'm around Psalm 70, 72, 73, because I love the Psalms and that it was just a very fallible man who was trying to lead, and grow up. And he's kind of just writing to how he feels, whether he wants to destroy somebody or he is screwed up or he feels abandoned. And so that is very valuable to me.
So sometimes we could be in seminary and we could kind of forget, right, that the whole point of being in seminary is to read. Make sure you do your devotions. Don't let seminary become a substitute church. I mean, all that's super important. Let me add, not that you need anyone to promote what you do, because you're pretty well known and all that. But
thank you for that. My mom tells me that.
But if there's anything, how could people help you in your ministry? Is there anything that you'd like to talk about that we haven't talked about or want to promote?
Yeah. I mean, I would say, first off, cover us in prayer. I'm a big believer in the power of prayer. I know most Christians are, but please, just like reading the Bible, don't let that become cliche. Pray for our association. We're 157 churches trying to work together. We don't all work together necessarily well or at the same time, but just pray for that unity in our association, as the enemy always tries to break up our family in that way. Pray for our church, as we are doing this tag team with Josh. Pray for him as, he's such a humble man, a wonderful young man that I've actually been pastoring with for the last 20 years. So it's nothing new to us. It's just new in terms of the labels and in terms of how much he's preaching and how much he's paid, And so, but pray for him as he continues to grow, and pray for me as I try to help him to get greater and I get lesser, and all the identity things that sometimes come with that, not just for me, but for my family. And, and please pray for our school, Anaheim Discovery Christian School. Running a Christian school in the context that is, in terms of junior high school, that is like 70% international is not easy when the international student program all of a sudden gets shut down, or just different contexts in terms of who we are around the world. And we run a really good school. I've got my own faculty and staff here. I'd like to pay them what they deserve, and I'd like them to stay mission focused in terms of what we do. And so it's hard as we have taken on more now, having every single grade level with oftentimes, life that comes with, all of us are in our 30s and 40s. And so we're going through life issues and traveling together, which bonds us together, but it's also really hard. If somebody out there could just donate $10 million to our school and we could just put it in savings and we'll just use the interest, that would be great. You know what I mean? But don't forget to split some with Gateway Seminary. There's the plug.
You go.
And so particularly the missions department, there's the plug, So no, but, honestly, prayer, if you have any students that can't afford a good Christian education and you're looking for a good Christian school, look us up. We don't necessarily always charge tuition. We're a ministry. We're trying to help, and so pray for that. And then lastly, if you're asking me personally, which, maybe you weren't, but I'm going to throw this in anyway. My oldest is 16, my second is 15, and they're going into their senior and junior year. So please pray for my heart as a dad, as they're getting ready for college, and, because everything we do isn't worth it if it only lasts one generation. And so I've tried to pass it on to the next generation. It's kind of what I was taught to do in my life and through Gateway. And, and so please pray for them as, these kids, they have it tough in that there's so many things that they can do. And, and it's very stressful. So please pray for my family in that way.
Mm-hmm. That family is about. You don't have family. That is the core of our ministry. Whether what do we have, right? That's right. Family
God,
is the core.
Family, yep. Church, work. God, family, church, work. Every once in a while, there's a little bit of shift. Never God, but yeah. So.
Hey, Victor. Hey, thanks a lot for joining. I'm going to stop recording, but I do appreciate your time.
It was my pleasure.